This is absolutely an essay about influence, and it's called Life is Ordinary Unless You Plan and Set in Motion a War. When I first met Major Jackson, it was at an event that I like to call, with the dishonesty of hindsight, the sycophantic shit show sonnet. We were in the East Village at the KGB bar, crammed between small round tables and young poets in skinny jeans, waiting to hear Erin Ballou and Brenda Shaughnessy read. Not a soul in the bar was paying any attention to me. When I tried to introduce myself, young folks pretended to stare through me, and older folks looked at me pityingly or lecherously, as if I were a young wannabe poet who hadn't yet learned the art of jade. The people I had come with were too high on poetry to pay any attention to the fact that no one in the room cared about anyone who wasn't famous, and when I caught their eyes over the heads of the studiously aloof patrons, they looked wild, their irises rimmed in white. Later that evening, I was appalled when, at the after party at the bar across the street, a girl from the new school, who had not yet introduced herself to me, reached over in the middle of a self-imposed and exclusive poetry workshop to eat the food directly from my plate. And then from the parting waves of bored bodies came the warm, smiling face of Major Jackson. He took my hand, introduced himself, and leaned in when I told him I was a poet. To him, I was clearly a poet, and a person worth talking to, despite my lack of a book, tenure-track position, or appropriate genes. The small gesture of humanity in a bar full of sycophants superseded the required level of gratitude and instead translated into pure, unadulterated admiration. 30 seconds into knowing Major Jackson, I was ready to provide a character witness for him in a court of law. Could I dare to hope that seeing my face again in the vast opulence of Wheeler Hall, room 315, 1 year later, would trigger his memory of that abysmal night? I sat in the back, watched his face as he scanned the room, and was silent as he began to read. It is not hard to fall in love with Major's poetry. From the assuredness of home, the houses on my block sleep like turtles, to the vulnerability of the speakers, freedom is a crater I keep falling in, to the beauty of conversation between urban POC and doorways smoking their first joints. I said I wanted to be a poet. My friend said to me, "So you want the tongue of God." His pieces leisurely work the landscape of urbanity and rhythm like the quiet mouths of goats grazing over vast acreage. The evening came to a halt for me when Major began to read a poem he called "OK Cupid," which describes as being written in the matter of procedural poetics, this meaning, as I could gather, something that begets something that begets something, and the somethings are almost always abstractions. Major began OK Cupid by saying, if you find yourself entering this poem, or identifying with the categories in this poem, know that categories are not you. The poem explored the different categories one must identify with to be a part of the online dating site OK Cupid, about how answering questions about categories then places you in a category that calculates your matches with other categories. Major Jackson clearly finds this notion ridiculous. How could any person be an abstract idea? One of my favorite moments in the poem goes something like this. Dating pancakes is like dating a blowjob. Dating a blowjob is like dating an orgasm. Dating an orgasm is like dating utopia, and dating utopia is like dating an Amish woman. It was marvelous to observe the effect Major's words had on people as they slowly became implicated in the poem. They were being held accountable to the identities they had claimed, to the ways they had defined themselves, to their very lifestyles as subjects to an overarching generality. I had, at the time, very recently joined the ranks of online dating with my own OkCupid profile. I answered the test that matched me with others who also care about queer politics, find cigarette smoke repulsive, would sleep with someone on the first date. I sleep well at night knowing there are other queers in the world who believe that nuclear war is unexciting, that the phrase making love is grotesque, and that it is hard to date people who are really messy. But these, all my future girlfriends, are going to be defined not by a series of categorical data cloistering, but by the daily actions of a body in motion. Dating my future girlfriend will be like dating expired orange juice, which is like dating socks on the floor, which is like dating Battlestar Galactica, which is like dating Thursday night date nights, which is like dating all of the exes you have both ever had, which is like dating a long road trip. Major Jackson makes being alive in this world a beautiful and quiet thing. In a world of all the wrong pairs of genes and the taxonomy of poetry into a marketable scene, he reminds us that categories are shapeshifters that resist classification, and that to fall into them like you would into a viper pit is to hitch yourself to a horse made of air. That night after the reading, he approached me, called me by name, complimented my dashing pink trench coat with black piping, and gave me his phone number so I could interview him later. And keep in touch, he said warmly. Long live poetry. Thank you. Woo!